At the April 9th, 1950 conference, President George Albert Smith tells the Latter-day Saints a wonderful and amusing missionary story.
When I was a young man, I was sent on a mission to the southern states. I was a young man. I had just turned 21. I became secretary of the mission, and while there was called to South Carolina, Columbia, South Carolina, because some of our elders had become seriously ill, and it was difficult to get word back and forth, so I got on the train and went down there. Found that they were improved, getting along all right. When I bade them goodbye, I got on the train and started home, and I passed a little Indian settlement, the side of the tracks. I saw there were several, evidence that there were quite a number of Indians there, so I reached over in front of me and touched the man who was sitting in the seat in front of me. I said, do you know what Indians these are? He says, they're the Catawbas. That's Brother Blue's tribe. And I said, well, do you know where they came from? He says, you mean the Catawbas? I said, any Indian. He says, nobody knows where the Indians came from. Oh, I said, yes, they do. I was talking to a man then about 45 or 50 years old, and I was just 21. And he said, well, where did they come from? I said, they came from Jerusalem 600 years before the birth of Christ. He says, where did you get that? I said, from the history of the Indians. Why, I said, you didn't know there was any history of the Indians. Well, I said, sure, there's a history of the Indians. It tells all about them. And then he looked at me as much as to say, my, you are trying to put one over on me. He said, where is this history? I said, would you like to see one? He said, I certainly would. I reached down under the seat in my little log cabin bag and took out a Book of Mormon and handed it to him. He said, my goodness, what is this? I said, that's the history of the ancestors of the American Indian. Why, he said, I never heard of it before. He said, may I look at it? And I said, yes. After he looked at it a few minutes, he turned around to me and he said, won't you sell me this book? I don't want to lose the privilege of reading it through. Well, I said, you'll be on the train for 3 hours. You can read it for 3 hours. That won't cost you anything. And so I had found that he was getting off further on. I had to get off in 3 hours. Well, in a little while he turned around again. He said, I don't want to give up this book. I've never seen anything like this before. And I could see he was a well-educated man of a lot of information apparently. And so I said, well, now here, I didn't tell him I wanted him to read the book and have to think it was a prize, so I said, I can't sell it to you. It's the only one I have. I didn't tell him I could get as many more as I wanted. Well, he said, I think you ought to sell it to me. I said, no, I'll tell you what I'll do. You keep it for 3 weeks. And at the end of that time, you write to me at Chattanooga, and I gave him my card with my address on, Secretary of the Mission. So we bade one another goodbye. In about 2 weeks, he wrote a letter, and he says, I don't want to give this book up. He says, I'm sure you can get another, and I'll pay you any price you want for it. Well, then I had my opportunity. I wrote back, I said, if you really enjoy the book and have an idea that it's worthwhile, accept it with my compliments. I got a letter of thanks back. Well, now I speak of that because that was the first time I had ever heard of the Catawba Indians. And there were only a few of them. I understand now from Chief Blue that 97% of the tribe are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints now. Now, coming back to this book again, Brother Roberts and I were sent about 15 years later down into the southern states on a mission. When we went into the hotel at Columbia, we registered and went to our room, and as soon as we got in our room almost, a knock came at the door, and the colored man said, there's a man downstairs who wants to see George A. Smith. That was the way I used to write my name. And I wrote it that way before I was married. Well, I said to Brother Roberts, what did he do? He said, send him up. So Brother Roberts, so the man went back, and pretty soon up come a man. knock on the door, and we opened it, and he reached out his hand. He said, "My, I'm glad to see you." I said, "Well, I'm glad if you're glad to see me. I'm glad to see you." But I said, "Who are you?" He gave me his name. I said, "What can I do for you?" "Why," he said, "don't you remember me?" I said, "Remember you? I don't think I ever saw you before." He says, "Isn't your name George A. Smith?" And I said, "Yes." "Well," he said, "I'm sure you're the man." And I said, "I met George A. Smith here years ago. He was doing missionary work here." "Oh," well, I said, "that's explained. There was another George A. Smith doing missionary work here, too." "Oh," he said, "it wasn't any other George A. Smith. It was you. Nobody that ever saw that face and forget it." Well, I said, "Then I guess I must be the man." And then he told me this story. He said, "You were on a train and we passed the Catawba Indian Nation." I said, "I remember all about it now." Came back in an instant. Well, now he said, "I want to tell you something. I read that book and I was so impressed with it, I made up my mind I'd like to take a trip down into Central America and South America." And he said, "I took that book with me. I put it in my grip. I went down there." And he said, "I knew more about those people than they knew about themselves." And he said, "I lost your address. I didn't know how to find you. And all these years I wanted to see you." And he said, "Today, when you registered downstairs, I happened to be standing behind you, and I happened to look at the book and saw your name." Now," he said, "this is what I want to say. I am the representative of the Associated Press for this part of the United States. I understand you're here in the interest of your people." I said, "Yes, Mr. Roberts and I are here." And he said, "Well, now let me say this to you. If there's anything I can do for you while you're here, if you want anything put in the press, give it to me, and I'll send it out. It won't cost you a cent. But I want to tell you one other thing." He says, "I've kept your missionaries out of jail. I've got them free from mobs." He says, "I've helped them every way I could, but I've never been able to get your name until now. So you may be interested, brethren and sisters, in knowing that I'm delighted to see Chief Blue here today, representing that tribe of fine Indians." By the way, I've met some of them since. Met one very fine young woman who's a school teacher, and others that I've met of that race. In fact, I have some trinkets in my office that were sent to me by members of that race. But I want to say that I'm happy to have this good man who represents the tribes that came from Lehigh. In other words, he's a descendant of Lehigh, as some of the others that are in the audience today. One good man that I'm sitting and looking at here came to the temple during the week and was sealed to his wife. They're coming into the church all around. And I'm so grateful this morning to be here and hear this testimony of this man who so long has been a faithful leader among his people and now comes to this general conference and bears testimony to us.